Well, good afternoon. It's Monday, February 4th, beautiful February 4th. And today is the beginning of Black History Month, as you know. And I want to make a few announcements to you. Please turn off your cell phones. I don't want to hear cell phones ringing. No food. Put your water away, drink. You can survive for 45 minutes without water. Put it away. And let's pay attention to our guest speaker, who is a man you wouldn't be able to have the privilege to meet. And he's here for us today. And before I start introducing Mr. Niemark, I want to talk to you about future guests. We have Audrey Smaltz, David Wolf, Michael Kors, Ralph Lauren's president, Joe Barato, and the new CEO, chairman of Liz Claiborne, Bill McComb, which is a privilege to have also. All right, so that's just some of them. And we have a few others, but I'll announce that next week. Are we all settled? Okay. I want you all, I've mentioned it before, but I'm going to repeat it because sometimes you talk to each other and you don't pay attention. You have to take notes of every guest speaker. It's important. Get your pad out with the pencil because your final exam, which is 20 multiple choice questions with answers that you will give, are based on the guest speakers we have. So pay attention to what they say and write down, make notes, okay? And you have 5 field trips that you've got to hand in. Don't wait till the last minute, because those who hand it in the last minute will lose a half a point. When you go on a field trip, hand it in right away, because we haven't got the staff to record all the field trips. You're 90 students here. 90 times 5 is a lot of papers to enter in your records. So please help us be cooperative and thoughtful, okay? And what else? Well, those are the important things. And I have, you've been calling me for interns. And I had the note from Michelle Correa, Emily Neville, Rong Su, Ju Young No, Jeon Brom, I couldn't read your writing, Bae, Min Kyung Kim, and you come up to room A639. I will give you the phone number and the name of the company that needs interns for tomorrow, okay? And there's 2 students who had late registration. Please pick up your course outline and all the information. Catherine has it for you. Kelly, well, no. And I have 2 students who registered late, so please pick up the information you asked for in your email about the class. So it's upstairs and you'll get it, or come to room A639. All right, and the positions that they need 7th on 6th, you come to the office after the lecture and I will give you the phone number and information, okay? Now, I'm so proud and so happy to have Mr. Ira Niemark. He could tell these stories, articulate the business lessons that made him the last man standing among the giants of fashion retailing, that continue to compel major multinational companies to seek his counsel. He's going to be speaking, and he will tell you, at some of the most prominent, wonderful schools. One is Wharton, that Mr. Niemark just told me, and he will tell you the rest. And so you're very privileged to have him here. And his books that are like, you should have like a Bible of retailing and designing, because you have to know the history of the industry you're going to. That's very important. If you don't know the past, you'll never make it to the future. The past is tied with the future. Remember that. And this book, which is the Bergdorf Goodman style of that lavender, it's chic, beautiful. And he has an insider's account on the rise of luxury retailing. Ira Neimark is a legendary retail executive whose career spans several decades. As chairman and CEO of Bergdorf Goodman, he set the records for the company over the 17 years of masterful leadership. He made it what it is today. He also distinguished himself at top management at Neiman Marcus, B. Altman, Bonwit Teller, etc. As director of the Fashion Institute of Technology here and Hermès of Paris, he was an adjunct professor of retail marketing at Columbia University Business School. The governments of Italy and France awarded him the prestigious Cavaliere della Repubblica and the Chevalier of the Order of the Arts and Letters, which is very hard and rare to receive. So he deserves all the accolades and the respect of someone who's given so much to fashion and retailing on the most elegant level. And I'm not going to say anything else because time is passing, and I'm anxious to bring Mr. Ira Neimark to the podium. And by the way, he will autograph the books. If you buy them, it's a discount is $25. They're over there. When the lecture is over, you can purchase, and Mr. Neimark will happily autograph the book for you.
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
Neimark.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody, does it work up there? Okay, fine. I would I'm fine. Thank you. I could use gin, not water, but that'll have to do. You know, you're all very fortunate having Professor Papazian talk to you and do your class. There aren't very many people can reach me on the telephone, so I want to see you February 4th at 4 o'clock at the school and be there on time. Yes, ma'am. And here I am. So in order to have the group of people that lecture here, I compliment you, Michael Kors, who started with me at Bergdorf's, and others. I feel an honor and a privilege to be with Professor Papazian and this class. So I thank you very much for having me here. You do not have to buy the book, by the way. The book is interesting reading. I think it's terrific. My wife designed the cover. She took the Bergdorf bag, which didn't mean too much, and here we have it. The book is in some schools, NYU has the book as required reading, because it really tells the story of what you all have to know to be successful in your field. At the end of each chapter, there's something called lessons learned. And at the end of each chapter, I explain what it was that I learned during that experience that I think will benefit all of you. The secret is you don't have to take notes from my lecture, if you forgive me, because if you write down www.iraneimark.com, you will get my website. And the website, I pay for the website, we have to use it. The website has a session called Ask the Author. So anything that I say today that you don't understand, that you don't take notes for, go to the website and you will be answered by me by email. Before I begin, how many people here have been to Bergdorf Goodman in the past 2 years? That takes care of that, so I'm finished. My speech is over. It's not necessary. Before I begin, let me tell you some brief stories about some of the people in Crossing Fifth Avenue who wrote the endorsements on the cover of the book. On the cover, Calvin Klein said, "Ira Neimark set the standard for a chief executive in retailing. He turned Bergdorf Goodman into a leading fashion store in the United States, and how he did it is a must-read for anyone interested in fashion." I thought that was pretty good. So I said, put that on the front cover. The reason Calvin wrote that is about 25 years ago, I was going through Paris to the Couture, and in the Concord Lounge, I saw Calvin. And believe me, Calvin looked like somebody off the street, a old jacket and jeans and so on. And I said, Calvin, I'm going over for the French Couture. And would you ever do American Couture for Bergdorf Goodman? Okay, Coach? He said no, he wasn't prepared to. 20 years later, I asked him again, and he said, yes, I will do a couture line for Bergdorf Goodman. And what a couture line meant, if he showed 50 styles, he withdrew 20 of them exclusive for Bergdorf, and they'd all be made by hand. And after the show was over, Marvin Traub, who you may have had as a lecturer, who then was head of Bloomingdale's, and Bert Tansky was the head of Saks, complained, why is this for Bergdorf's and not for us? And he proudly said, Bergdorf is in the couture business, you guys are not, and that's the end of the story, so he deserved to be on the cover. Donald Trump called me when I was the CEO of Bergdorf's, and they were taking down Bonwit Teller, who some of you may be too young to remember, and I went to the city council with him to meet and explain that Bergdorf would feel honored to have Trump Tower when Bonwit Teller came down, and as the story goes, Bonwitz came down and Trump went up. When the book was published, my agent wrote a letter. Would he please write an endorsement for the book? And his secretary said, no, he gets too many requests, and he's not going to do it. I wrote a letter back, very politely, Donald, get on with it. I did you a favor. I want you to do me a favor. And Donald was very nice, and he wrote a very nice endorsement that I thought was pretty good. And he wrote that this was a great retailer in a great city in a great store, and he did a great job. So I was very proud of that. Leonard Lauder wrote a memo because he invited me to lunch when I was the CEO of B. Altman, and we were having lunch. He's, Ira, are you happy as working with B. Altman? And I said, yeah, I'm happy. Should I not be? He said, well, I want to talk to you, be the CEO of Bergdorf Goodman. I said, boy, I'm unhappy. I want to talk to them fast. So we put Leonard Lauder there. Carla Fendi has a list because Carla was the first of the Italian designers to recognize Bergdorf Goodman had a future, and they came into Bergdorf's first, where Bloomingdale's had the handbags and Bendel's had the leathers. We put the combination together, and once Carla came in, everybody came in, Giorgio Armani and so on, and that was the beginning of it. She wrote a nice endorsement. Bert Tansky, who now is the head of Neiman Marcus Group, gave permission to use the Bergdorf bag, approved the book, and I'm very pleased to say I appointed Bert as my successor at Bergdorf's. He has since gone on to great success. Alan Questrom wrote this. Alan, as you may know, was head of Neiman Marcus. I recommended him for that job. I wasn't alone. Everybody thought he should have it. He then went on to Federated Department Stores, JCPenney, a great success. He wrote a very nice endorsement. Jim Gold is now the head of Bergdorf Goodman. He wrote an endorsement. And Jeffrey Aronson, who was the head of Oscar de la Renta, and Donna Karen wrote an endorsement. The reason my lawyer there, I wrote some things in the book that some people might want to sue me for, so he's protected me on that. At FIT, I'm delighted to have the privilege to tell the story of crossing Fifth Avenue to Bergdorf Goodman and my thoughts on leadership in retailing. My presentation has been to different audiences. Last week, I was at Columbia Business School. And by the way, at Columbia Business School, I saw three very attractive young ladies walking through, very well dressed, at Uris Hall. Meanwhile, the students looked nowhere as attractive as this audience today, as you are dressed. And I said, they're not, yes? No, don't tell me. I like to think they do this every day. I asked the professor, I said, I saw three very attractive dressed young women in the hallway, and most of the students here looked like just coming in from a camping trip or a baseball game. He said they were most likely here for an interview. It rang a bell, and I want to tell you a story about an interview that I think would affect every one of you in your career. I mentioned Columbia Business School, NYU School of Business, the NYU Executive Forum, the Luxury Market Council, today FIT, an organization called Initiatives in Art and Culture, and next month I've been invited to speak at the Wharton School. It gives me great pleasure to tell the story to you how Bergdorf Goodman turned out to be an oil well or a gold mine on Fifth Avenue, and how my opportunities and success is available to everyone in this classroom today. Let me say that again. This opportunity and success is available to everyone in this classroom today, which really means if you're here to listen, pay attention. If the professor wants to take notes, take a lot of notes. If you want to be a success, listen to me. If you're not interested, either go to sleep or leave the room, because what I'm going to tell you today is a secret of success for every one of you here. There's nothing that I did that anyone here can't do the same and achieve the success that I've had and enjoyed every minute of it along the way. I'm here to inspire you and to give you some of the secrets to success in the world of luxury retailing. If I do a proper job, and I would hope you'll benefit from my experience, and will have some of the key roads to success in your future, and hopefully for you every opportunity in the world to be a success. First, let me tell you why I asked you to wear what I would call appropriate dress. Then I will tell you why crossing Fifth Avenue to Bergdorf Goodman and the many lessons learned along the way, and tell you one of the first secrets of success is presentation, presentation, presentation. How do you sell a package? Whether it's yourself, a dress collection, artwork, or display. Whenever you're selling, you'll always be selling, you are the package. The question is the package properly wrapped? Is it made to make the sale? How do you present yourself? It's difficult to see as an example how fashion retailers, think of this now, fashion retailers all over the country, all over the world, spend millions of dollars each year on advertising and display to create a fashion image, and only to have the salespeople wearing what they want to project as their image. Years ago, the employee discount was given for employees to wear clothes to look appropriately for that store. I can walk into a store like Saks Fifth Avenue, run by a good friend of mine. The salespeople in the cosmetic department last time I was there looked like they came in from a baseball game. They ruin the image, and Saks is spending millions to create We Are the Great Saks Fifth Avenue. Those of you who are interested in the Wall Street Journal, and I'll give this to Professor Papazian at the end of my lecture, was an article this week in Law Without Suits, and now how new hires still flout the tradition of what it looks like to be a proper lawyer. I gave an answer when people said, well, we try to dress like our customers. And I said, fine. As a lawyer, if you represented a circus, would you dress like a clown? And I feel very strongly about it, because when you walk in, and if I went to my office, you were looking for a job, and I thought you didn't look right, I'd say, next, and off you go. There's a way to look, a way to present, and all of you studying here are intelligent and smart people know that's how it is. So now that I lectured you on that, let me tell you the success story is in 3 parts today. Number 1, it starts with Horatio Alger's story. This very nice young lady said, how did I start? And I'll tell you that. It was interesting. I might add, it was the only job I could get without taking a test. How I learned Yankee retailing, and what it took to make Bergdorf Goodman the top fashion store in America today, and I would say, if not the world, and lessons learned along the way. I find that each time I invite to discuss my book, Crossing Fifth Avenue, Bergdorf Goodman, different audiences find the book interesting from different views, depending, of course, on the profession, careers, and your background. Example, the Luxury Market Council, made up members such as Bergdorf Goodman, Neiman Marcus, Cartier, Tiffany, to name a few. They asked me, how did I have the vision to know that Bergdorf Goodman had such an enormous potential sitting on Fifth Avenue and 58th Street? Also, how did I work out the exclusive arrangements with fashion designers, as I mentioned to you about Calvin Klein, and how should they go about that strategy today? They also the different levels of customer service then and now, which I'll explain with your permission at the end of the session. This customer service today is what I consider non-existent. The Fashion Institute people want to know, my last lecture, how to decide on what career in the fashion industry should be your goal, and equally, how important and what steps did I take to get there, which would apply to everyone sitting here today, because you all have your eye on a target, and you should. At the Columbia Business School MBA conference, why is the luxury end of retailing enjoying record growth compared to the middle and lower markets, and how long it will continue? As you read this Christmas, the middle market stores did not do well, the high stores did well, and the lower stores didn't do well at all. I'm involved with Hermes, I'm on their board, and I'm happy to say Hermes had a Christmas the likes we never saw before because people who have a lot of money spent a lot of money. I also thought you'd like to hear an insider's account of the tremendous rise of luxury retailing and how it came about from business marketing and a financial point of view. I wrote Crossing Fifth Avenue because I felt the book would answer all of the above questions for you, and because I felt important to leave a record of my business experience with the hope others might take an opportunity to benefit them, and I mean you. When I wrote the book, Women's Wear Daily gave me permission to look at their morgue to go through and do the history. As I turned the pages and I saw all the big shots when I was a kid growing up, we were in awe of these guys. They ran the stores, they did a good job. They were all gone. They were all gone. Not one left a record of what they did or how they did it. And I felt it was my responsibility, since I was so fortunate, to pass on my information to you to help you achieve your success. The stores I will talk to you about today may all sound like Retail 101. However, they are basic business principles applied to Bergdorf Goodman and over this wonderful store to survive and to achieve its rightful position as the leader in the world of luxury fashion. First, a bit about Horatio Alger. My start in retailing was, in many careers, a lot of luck, but what I call the pinball bouncing in the right direction. When I was 16 years of age, due to the Great Depression, and no one had any money, I mean no one, and how it affected my family, unfortunately, I had to go to work. I was sent to an employment agency for a job at Bonwood Teller at 56th Street and 5th Avenue. I had no idea where that was. I asked a taxi driver. He told me I had 25 cents for shine to make an impression, just as I told you, and there I went. I got the job. That was Bonwood Teller again, for those of you who don't know. It was located where Trump Tower is today. I was going to be a page boy in the 721 Club during the Christmas holiday if I fit the uniform. There were 5 other guys, here, here, and here, and I fit the uniform like that, and I got the job. In the book, I talk about if I fit the uniform, meaning get your foot in the door. Once I fit the uniform, I was now an employee. Then it was up to me to do my job. How many of you have read about movie producers who started a mailroom in Hollywood and rose to great success? The trick is to get in, then take care of it. Pick the company you want, but get the job. That's what I call fit the uniform. I was taken so much with the luxury fashion retail environment that I asked to stay on to continue my high school education, what they then called night school, and I think I qualified for the title of a high school dropout, which should not happen to any one of you. I felt, however, I exchanged one type of classroom for another, and I never looked back. You'll notice throughout this talk I'll mention lessons learned a number of times. The first lesson learned in the book: to get the job, make sure you fit the uniform, or whatever else required, as I said a moment ago, to get your foot in the door. A most important lesson, and those who read my book, and those who will, who will appreciate luxury retailing elegance, will also appreciate that Bonwood Teller's environment captivated me. I discovered that despite the store being 15 blocks from Broadway and 3,000 miles from Hollywood, it was like show business. The display windows glittered with elegance, projected drama like a stage set. The interior decor was like a theater lobby. The employees, from the stylish salespeople to the military-looking elevator operators to the elegant president, they all seemed like acting out carefully scripted roles. The finery of the customers, the scent of the cosmetic department, the luxury of the merchandise brought elegance to life. I decided this is where I wanted to start my career. I was home. At that memorable Christmas, I was promoted from page boy to assistant to the doorman. Not the doorman, assistant to the doorman on 56th Street and 5th Avenue, now the Trump Tower. I mention this only to emphasize, as mentioned an example of lessons learned. If you're going to be ambitious, aim high. There were 5 or 6 parking attendants who were working with me, and they were all taking exams for the police department and the fire department. Not for me. When I saw the president drive up the store each morning in a chauffeur-driven LaSalle, handsomely dressed, I made my second important decision. One day, I was going to have his job, and I did. Lesson learned. In planning a career, aim as high as you can. You may not hit the target at the top, but getting close is better than not aiming at all. Shoot high. Bonwood Teller fortunately provided me with a scholarship to attend Columbia Business School, also at night. I mentioned 45 years later, or 35 years later, I I was an adjunct professor at Columbia, and I was very pleased that the wheel turned. Fortunately for me, the president of Bon Motella, Bill Holmes, great Irishman, great guy, he became my mentor or godfather, and this was one of the great experiences for me in my business. Lessons learned again. It is most important whenever possible to have a fairy godmother or a godfather, sometimes called a rabbi, to guide you through the minefields of the business world to keep you pointed in the right direction to reach your goals. I find no individual, even yours truly, can make the right decisions without asking a person of experience, tell me what you think, then make your decision. I won't bore you with my misadventures as a buyer. I was really not a good buyer. Only to say my talents were more productive as a merchandise manager, directing buyers to avoid the mistakes that I had made, and I made a lot. A bit of retail history. In 1947, many years ago, Atlas Corporation that owned Bon Motella, it was run by Floyd Odlum, sold Bon Motella to Walter Hoving, and to bring you up to date, Walter Hoving was the father of Tom Hoving, who ran the Metropolitan Museum of Art. That became a series of events that, for my career, eventually led to the demise of that once great store. It was equivalent today, Bonwitz would be the Bergdorf Goodman today. And if I imagine if Bergdorf Goodman disappeared, it would be on a building went up, we'd all be losing something. It's important to mention at this point, as Terry Agins wrote in the Wall Street Journal in 1989, a tale of two retailers. Bergdorf rose and Bon Motella fell. 15 years previously, the two stores were the opposite. In learning Yankee retailing, after Bon Motella changed hands, I was offered a position as divisional merchandise manager of a small apparel store in Providence, Rhode Island called Gladding's. Would you believe it? The store was founded in 1766. It was the oldest store in the country. I used to kid my people by saying we had merchandise to prove it. Fortunately for me, the president of Gladding's, Leonard Johnson, who, by the way, is now 90-some-odd years old, lives in New Hampshire, and he knows I'm on a lecture tour, I tell him about leadership. I said, what's there to tell him? You either have leadership qualities or you don't. And I can talk about it all day long. And he said, you were a great leader. And I said, well, I was glad what do you mean? You encourage the people to get the best out of them you possibly could. That is leadership. So I'll tell Mr. Johnson, 95 years old in New Hampshire, I spoke to today, he'll be very pleased. He encouraged me in my merchandising efforts to bring about impressive gains in sales and profit. I was never sure how you decide how much inventory to have in a store. When I came back from the war and I went to work at Bon Motella again, they said, here are the budgets, you work on them, and the buyer said, I don't have enough money. And it was a very vague manner of how you would do inventory. And as I moved through business, I was never satisfied. And one day I learned, I found by working closely with people who have the same problem, how do we answer the question of any one of you here, and many of you will be buyers, and your bosses will tell you how much money you have, and you will try to fit your purchase into that. And I said, that was all wrong. Don't tell your bosses that, but I'll tell you what I did, and maybe you can tell your boss something. Lesson learned, if you don't know how or why to make a merchandise procedure successful, keep your eyes and ears open until you find the person who has the answer. In the book, I explain how a salesman who covered all of New England and I went from store to store and looked at their merchandise procedures, and each case we shook our head, said that was not the answer. And we finally sat down one day with a yellow pad and said, what would any one of you charming people here want to be a buyer? What do you have to know before you buy? I saw somebody yawning there. If I'm putting you to sleep, I really am sorry. I was recognized by other retailers, and Gladding's fortunately belonged to Frederick Atkins' buying office. You remember that office, a great office, and had some of the great stores of retail of that time. I'll name some of them to you, but the steamships at that time, they have disappeared. And I'm sure the names will not be familiar to anyone in this room as they would be to your mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles. Don't have to raise your hands, but B. Altman and Company, G. Fox in Hartford, the Broadway in California, Garfinkel's Washington, D.C., D.H. Helms in New Orleans, you know all these stores. J.B. Ivy in Charlotte, Liberty House, Hawaii, Miller Roads, Richmond, Virginia. Rich's last week when I was in Atlanta, I said, Rich in Atlanta, who know that? And all the young people looked at me like, oh yeah, that's a Macy's store now. I'll tell you a story. Back in 1960, when I was made the merchandise manager chairman of the Atkins store meeting in Greenbrier, because I was new, young, and I would take the job on. They didn't pay. They asked me to organize the meeting, and I did. And as all the big wheels, the presidents and CEOs stood up and explained how they were going to open more stores and do this and do this and this, and all the presidents, big shots, are very impressive. Then it came my time to speak. I said, before the meeting, since I lived in Rhode Island, I went to see some of the mill outlets. I don't know if you've heard of mill outlets. They started mill outlets. They now call discount stores. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, if the mill outlets continue and proliferate, we will be out of business unless we do something about it. And you know what they said? Ira Neimark, you always worry too much. They're out of business. They did not pay attention. I might mention that I was an advisor to Mitsukoshi in Tokyo 5 and 10 years ago, and they had me meet the Japanese Department Store Association, and with a good translator, I explained exactly the same situation. I said, in Japan, the discount stores are going to take over and traditional stores will disappear. You know what they said in I can't say it in Japanese. Mr. Neimark, you always worry too much. Well, what do you think happened in Japan? One by one, they're dropping out. The discount stores have taken over. Today, the revolution of retailing is Walmart and the discount stores you are all familiar with, and the traditional department stores who sat there, didn't do anything, they're out of business today. And here's the beginning of what throughout the book outlines the merchandise principles that I want to tell you about today that I learned in New England that were applied to Bergdorf Goodman and became a highly profitable leading fashion retailer in America today, if not the world. Some of the key merchandise principles such as inventory management, unit weeks of supply, which I explained a moment ago, but let me tell it to you in basic manner. Normally, how many want to be buyers here in this organization? All right, 10%. Merchandise managers, fashion directors, designers. Well, that's pretty good. My only claim to fame being a designer, I was very close to Jeffrey Bean. When I came back from the war, I met Jeffrey in 1946, a long time ago, and you wouldn't think of it. Jeffrey was a very thin, good-looking guy. And I worked at Bonwatella, and we would stop in the Plaza Hotel, and he taught me to drink 2 martinis and a Stinger. Well, he may have walked up to 78th Street, but I had to get in the subway to go back to Brooklyn. And my mother said, whatever happened to you? I couldn't talk, I just had to pass out. That's how I began learning about designers. They really know how to drink. But seriously, Jeffrey was great. He went to Europe, he came back, with a woman's check shirt that had a tie on the collar, and he gave it to me. And one of the few good things I did as a buyer, I made it into a women's shirt, and I tied it like that in little checks, red checks, blue shirt, yellow checks, and put it by the door for $7.99, which for today would be $80, $100. We stole them like crazy. So, Jeffrey, I was very proud of him, a great designer and a great gentleman. In inventory management, what we decided, and visualize this, those of you who will be involved, even designers be interested in this. Today, when a buyer goes into the market, and let's say she's going to buy he or she's going to buy Calvin Klein or Donna Karan, which is the example I will use today. The buyer has usually said, well, here's the budget. You have $500,000. Just use a number. It could be 50 for small store, it could be $5 million for big store. So let's use again, $500,000. So the buyer goes in, no matter how smart the buyer would be, and I've had a lot of smart ones, they look at jacket, look at skirts, or look at sweaters, or look at this, and they add it up and put the whole thing, get back to their office, and gee, that's $550,000 or $600,000. What do I do? They begin cutting away, and they wind up with what I call an unbalanced assortment. What we did, we said, if you were the buyer, you look to be a great buyer. If you were the buyer, you went to Calvin Klein, you too. We said, if you like this jacket, you tell me or tell us how many jackets can you sell a week. And if the buyer was intelligent and worked with us long enough, she'd say, oh, that's easy. I could sell 5 a day, 25 a week, no sweat. And how about this, let's say with jackets. Well, okay, that means for a month you'll sell 100, 125. That's about right. 2 months, 250, and so on. The buyer told us what he or she thought they could sell. Critical. We then said, okay, we're going to give you an arbitrary figure, 12 weeks of stock, which in this case would be 150 jackets, or whatever we decided, jackets. Oh. Next, did the same thing with sweaters, did the same thing with pants, the whole thing came out. We didn't care if it came out to 700,000. The higher it came out, the better deal we had. Compare this to a buyer who goes in and says, I only have so much to do. Now, if the buyer knew his or her business and they sold 25 or 30 a week, we were home free. If the buyer did not know their business and they sold 10 or 5 or 10 a week, had a problem. But we could adjust it by the weeks of supply, and we're able to adjust our inventory. We eventually had Calvin Klein and Donna Karan for a small store on 58th Street. Our inventory was as large as Bloomingdale's or Saks Fifth Avenue. Could you imagine sitting on 58th Street and Fifth Avenue having we had, when I first got there, we had a Calvin Klein department as big as this area this young lady with the book is sitting. And I asked the buyer, how can you be good with Calvin Klein when Bloomingdale's on Lenox Avenue had a department 4 times the size and Bentley's across the street? Oh, my selection is better. That is what we call a buyer's mentality, and she didn't last very long. I don't know how big it is. I haven't been to Bergdorf in a couple of weeks to keep changing everything. Our department was much larger than ever. I might add that if you look at the New York Times in this relationship a week ago, they had an article about Sears Roebuck going down the tube. Sears is having a very tough time. And they said, they don't have a system like JCPenney or Kohl's has resulted in poor inventory control and inability to respond to fast-changing conditions. I'm talking about designing this thing 1950, which is a long time ago. These guys are still flubbing around on Sears Roebuck, and they're going to go down the drain. In women's wear, they said the same thing is happening with other retailers as well, and we're talking Dillard's, which is having another problem. And Dillard's at one point had the best electronic situation in the country of what's going on. You know what happened? It went in one ear and went out the other, which didn't mean a damn for that type of stuff. So inventory management, ladies and gentlemen, is the key or the failure to success. Those of you who have studied history, compare John Harrison, who invented the method of measuring longitude in the 18th century. Up until that point, they didn't know where they were going. He kept sailing from winding on the rocks. The unit weeks of supply kept buyers from having too much inventory and winding on the rocks as well. Of course, the reverse of this is not having the right amount of stock on hand or the wrong amount of stock on hand. It is critical that Bergdorf Goodman merchandising planning, and the examples I gave you of Calvin Klein and Donna Karan, would be accurate. I say this is my biggest concern for inventory management. Those of you going to be designers couldn't care less. Although I'll tell you this, Donna Karan is known as a designer having the largest amount of inventory of fabrics that she never used. And it isn't something I invented. It is a disaster, or was. I don't know how she's doing it. It was a disaster. She would look at a fabric, throw it aside. So her inventory was up to here, and up to a while, Donna Karan financially had problems. The major reason for high markdowns, lower profit in many retail enterprises is a lack of professional planning. As I said, see Sears Roebuck. Vendor program. As a merchandise manager, I met with every designer we did business with. What is his plan? What is our plan? Made sure we agreed with each other on a proper negotiation. When I called Bill Blass, I said, Bill, we're putting you as a vendor program. He became insulted. He said, I'm not a vendor, I'm a designer. So be it. Now let's talk about professional buyers as a key to success. In retailing, there are many important positions, but none as important as a talented buyer. Executives who can identify and develop and encourage talent are critical to a retailer's success. A good example of this, as all of you know, is the Gap has gone this way and H&M has gone that way. I had a buyer once, one of my first experiences as a merchandise manager. She brought a blouse to me and said, Mr. Niemark, I can sell 50 of these. And I said, terrific, what do you need to sell 500? Looks at me like crazy. Well, get me a window and get me an ad. And I said, you have an ad, you have a window, and we sold 500. And I realized if I could find a buyer who could identify like you can identify oil in the ground, give her all the support she needs, and life will go on. And I'm happy to tell you, am I okay? Am I going too slow, too fast? I'm going to run out of time? By the time I'm finished, they won't have any question. I'll answer them. But anyway. Okay, I will cut it short. I was merely to say that at Bergdorf Goodman, what we did, we went to the fashion magazines and hired a stylist from the accessory department, a stylist from the sportswear department. We hired stylists, not buyers. We then said, you tell me what the item is, and as mentioned a moment ago, I'll tell you how much to buy. And off we went. The business has gone from $38 million to today $500 million. That's a big jump. I'm not going to talk about Beatrice Fox Auerbach. You're going to make me sell the book then because it's all in the book. Beatrice Fox Auerbach ran G. Fox. There are 30 pages in the book. And she said, Mr. Niemark, I want you to be a storekeeper. Don't tell me about retailing. Don't tell me about this. I want you to run the store. She'll explain that, how it goes on. I'll skip that part. On the main floor at Bergdorf's, of those of you who have been there recently, you will see the most successful, better jewelry department in the country. It does over $40 million. When I got there, they had a shoe department in the middle of the floor on 4,000 square feet that paid 11% rent. It took me years to get rid of them, but today it's a gold mine. You can see that. When we built the men's store, what happened was they were going along, and the women's store, we said we want to have a store that takes care of the old, what we used to call the blue-headed rinse crowd, the older ladies. We wanted the younger ones, and we brought them in, and it worked very well. When FAO Schwartz decided to move across the General Motors building, and they said the space across Fifth Avenue is available for Bergdorf Goodman, will be interested, I'm really smart, and I said no. I want behind Bergdorf's, the theater, and build a store there, but that was not available. So I said, okay. We built it. At first I had one floor, then I took two, then I took three. I had an option for four. I quit at three at 40,000 square feet. And it was built, and Stuart Elliott in the New York Times called it Niemark's Folly. And paraphrasing Winston Churchill, I wrote to the New York Times and I said, he may be a good advertising. He doesn't know a darn thing about no, I didn't think they did that. Didn't know anything about merchandising. And I said, as paraphrasing Winston Churchill, some folly, some store. Today that store is doing $80 million and still going. Both stores are $2,000 square foot. And that is like having an oil well on Fifth Avenue. The Goodman family, there's no secret, sort of in the book, they get 5% of sales. So if the store is doing $500 million, those of you in the mathematical class here could figure that's $25 million a year. So every time you pass Bergdorf Goodman, visualize an oil well they have in Texas pumping that money out. It works beautifully and everybody is happy. I'm going to finish this without telling you too much because the book really tells the whole story better than I can say it now. But we said that in changing the store from an old, dull, expensive, intimidating store, we wanted the store to become young, exciting, expensive, and intimidating. It was not for everyone. It had to be for a customer who would appreciate fashion. I guess the part about looking at the couture in Paris turned everyone on, and once we took the couture from Paris and put it in, everybody, including the Fendis, wanted to be in, and then the Fendis, the Armani, the Valentinos, the Ferré, the couture of YSL, Chanel, Ungaro, Givenchy, they all came in. However, the situation has changed. Designers now run the show. Ralph Lauren said in 2003, we are in control of our destiny. They can now come in and say, I want the third floor, I want 2,000 square feet. Yes, sir. It used to be, Ralph, you're going to go in that corner and pay attention. If I put that lady to sleep, I apologize. Now, the last point I'd like to make, Professor, is we had a fashion director called Dawn Mello. How many people want to be fashion directors here? You're the smart one. If you have the eye, be able to say, that is what it's going to be, you'll be a zillionaire overnight. The fashion director is someone like the editor of the New York Times who will say, here's a national story for their audience. And the editor of the Post will say, here's a fire in Brooklyn for your story. Dawn would say, this belongs in the store, this doesn't belong in the store. Give it a point of view. And that's how that worked out. A fashion director will set the tone. Now, with Professor Papagian's permission, I'd like to be remiss if I didn't tell you that aside from Beatrice Fox Auerbach, that all executives must be on the selling floor after 11 o'clock in the morning to take care of customers. And Jack Mitchell of Mitchell's in Westport, who wrote Hug Your Customers and his new book, Hug Your People. His father, an old retailer at a retail outing, said to me, Palm Beach, we were having a drink, and he said, you see all those retailers there, the big shots? He said, not one knows anything about customer service. With that part on customer service is the one part I think that all of you, whether you're going to be a buyer, a fashion director, advertising, or anything, have to know that customer service is the most important part of the business. The New York Times had a story about Amazon sending something to a guy's home because it was lost, like it's an amazing thing, should be done all the time. It's an idiot running, I'm not supposed to say that, of Circuit City. I hope no one's related to him. He decided to cut back on the regular salespeople. They were too expensive. He hired cheaper salespeople. His stock went from $8 to $4, and he said he was sorry he made a mistake. And they pay a guy a salary like that. Those of you who go to Apple on Fifth Avenue, best service in the world. It's amazing that when stores will run an ad, this is the end, stores will run an ad, they will spend $50,000 to full-page ad. It was 50 when I was there, maybe 60 now. And they will announce an item, a sale, something, an event. What happens? You go to the store, you are lucky to find a salesperson there to take care of you. Believe it. You'd think they would figure, I'll spend $25,000 for the ad and $25,000 for salespeople, and look at the business I'll do. They either have never learned or never knew or don't understand it. Now that is half my talk. The other half would put the lady next to her to sleep as well. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to know anything about the book or any questions I talked about today, as I said before, you go to www.iranemar.com and it'll answer the question of the professor. Any question? Yes, ma'am. I helped put them out of business, which is not in the article. In the book, you'll see where I had Halston and Bergdorf's, and one day, my wife and I driving up Central Park West and the Museum of Natural History, and banners all over the place, J.C. Penney announces Halston. And my strategy and model for the business was exclusive and semi-exclusive of Bergdorf's. Bad enough, I was splitting it with Saks and possibly with Bergdorf's, but to split it with J.C. Penney was not in my model. And we dropped it, and then his other problem went out. Now, the sixth guy, as you read the story, is putting the line together. And Bergdorf's is interested, otherwise Jim Gold would not have made a comment. And what will happen, if a line looked very good, then the buyer is going to say, I can sell 20 jackets, 10 skirts, and so on and so forth, and they'll wind up with an inventory. And if the designer negotiates and says, well, Saks wants me, and Barney's wants me, and this guy, Bloomingdale's wants me, well, we'll give you 3,000 square feet if you stay out of Bloomingdale's, or so on. So it's a negotiating factor that they will get. And Bergdorf's also recently, last week, opened a brand new shop. I want to say Balenciaga, wasn't it? A French designer. Lanvin. Thank you. And they wanted that line for a long time. They got it. in the article it said, "We'll most likely be exclusive for the time being with Bergdorf's." Whereas in the Paulson thing, they said 50 outlets in the country. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's negotiating. Yes, ma'am.
Well, everybody knows that American dollars went down a lot, and it made a lot of the tourist comes and a lot of buy, like shopping people coming from like overseas. And what do you do with those people who are not able to speak enough English? Do like a better customer service because it's a higher level of quantity.
If I understand your question is, with all the Europeans or all the foreigners, East, West, and whatever, and they come into a store and they don't have people who can understand their language clearly enough to take care of them, then that would be a disaster. I don't know what's happening there today in Bergdorf, so I'm not there too often. My wife is, she didn't retire, I retired. I would make sure that we had people who could speak any language that you want to. Because unless you can communicate, there's no business. I mean, it's just people walk in and say, they don't understand me.
So it means hiring more Asian.
Multi-language people, Asian, German, Japanese. When I used to work with Mitsukoshi, they always had a translator with me, no matter where, just to make sure that I could make my points to the executives I talked to. They said retail was down. Yeah, but I think, like anything else, you have to look at it. The dumbest thing, I thought, and Dan, don't quote me, the New York Times, the writer was Bob Bozer, I think, for the fashion guy. And the headline was, "Tiffany's takes a hit." The high-end, he was wrong. It wasn't the high-end business, 50,000 up. Tiffany's, as you all know, you can go over there, buy something $25, $50, $100. That got hit. The middle range, and I said earlier that I was surprised when I checked the figures with Hermes. The figures they gave were better than they were last year by a big number, because people who have, you read all about these people, all kinds of money, they spend it. And the average price in Hermes is not inexpensive. And they have people of any language in Hermes that would be interested. If not, you get back and let me know. We'll raise the devil with them. Yes, ma'am. I think if someone was to give this microphone to this young lady. I think you better give her the mic.
What can an employee do to wow? What can an employee do to wow the manager or the CEO? What are you really looking for in a person?
Say it in the mic.
Okay. When you worked at Bergdorf's, what could really wow you? What could a hopeful employee do to really wow you? What would you look for in a great employee? Okay. Okay, well, I want to work at Bergdorf's. It's my dream. What could I do to really make sure that that happens? What does Bergdorf's look for?
would you suggest that a young lady such as this enter? I think they have programs at many of the stores.
I don't know if they have a program as such. I did suggest to one person, and I'll tell you a secret at school, I told you earlier, I'm not trying to sell the book. But in the book, I mentioned a woman by the name of Marita O'Day, who I hired as the personnel director of Bergdorf Goodman many years ago. And Marita is now the head of, they call it Human Resources today, the head of Human Resources for Neiman Marcus Group. And what you could do, you don't have to buy the book, but if you could, what I would do, I would write to Marita O'Day, this is the way I think, and say, gee, Ms. O'Day, I read about you in Mr. Neimark's book. I would like very much to meet you and have an interview. She's not, what does she think you're going to say? No. I mean, that's called opportunistic. Take advantage of a situation. The expression is you don't sit there with your thumb in your ear and hope somebody recognizes you. This is, hello, here I am, in some shape or form. I hope that answers your question in some manner. Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if maybe I didn't understand, but Bergdorf's, do they use a budget when they're buying, or do they go
They have a
by
budget.
demand? Okay.
They have a budget, but the budget is done differently, or was different when I was there, because how do you take a small store of 140,000 square feet on 58th Street and Fifth Avenue, Saks Fifth Avenue, 800,000 square feet, and Bloomingdale's $1 million, and Neimark sitting with a small store, and you looking for, we'll use Donna Karan. You go to Bergdorf, see 10 pieces or 10 styles or 20, forget it. Bloomingdale's hundreds. That's what I'm interested in. So what we had to do was build an inventory, and we built it on bright young women like you who would say, gee, I can sell 10 of that jacket in a day with no sweat. If you're right, we said, oh, give it 10, give it 20, give it 30. We figured out how many to give her. And so eventually our inventory wound up as big as Bloomingdale's Saks. Matter of fact, it used to be such with people like Armani, who got the line to the floor first. And we reached the point the line did not go through the receiving and shipping. You know, we said, skip that, put it on the floor, and the customer would grab the stuff and put the tickets on later. That's how critical this delivery of how much stuff you had to have.
Any more questions?
Yes, here's a bright one.
What's the best way to find an executive to be like your rabbi in the industry?
Well, it goes back to the same thing of being recognized in some manner. When I mentioned you saying good morning the first day on the job, who's this kid? And the second thing was at the door, I mentioned to this young lady on the door, it's in the book, I was opening doors for the people. By the way, I have the doorknob. Donald Trump gave me the doorknob as a souvenir to have it on my desk, so I know when I was 16 years old, it's still there. But what I did, good morning, good afternoon. And two buyers came down after a meeting. We just had a meeting with Mr. Holmes, the head of the store. Are you Ira Neimark? I said, yes. He said, if everybody would greet customers in the store the way the kid on the door does, we'd be a better store. Answer your question, I was recognized. Since then, Bill Holmes said, make that kid my office boy, give him a scholarship to Columbia, and because he saw, I followed his route. He was a immigrant who had no background. When I mean no background, he was a high school dropout. He may have been a public school dropout for all I know, but this guy had an eye. This will work, this will work, this will work. So you have to recognize, that's all I can, I may be oversimplifying, but that's the way it is.
Any more questions?
Well, thank you very, very much. I enjoyed talking. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yes?
Loud.
Loud.
I know you are the prominent leader in the fashion industry. Could you define the leadership?
Leadership?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to send an email tonight to Leonard Johnson up in New Hampshire and say someone asked the right question. I think leadership makes people want to follow you and believe in you. Not because you're the boss. So this guy knows what he's talking about. The last example I'll give to you, when I developed the week's supply setup, and I came to G. Fox, a department store as large as Bloomingdale's, and a buyer, a man who must have been 60 years old, been there for years, and stumbled around buying dresses. And I presented my system to him, and he made it work. And it sort of goes back to your question. And Mrs. Auerbach, who had him employed there for many, many years, He said, Mrs. Albach, I learned more from Mr. Niemark in 6 weeks than I learned in the last 6 years. Well, all of a sudden, she began to pay attention. Who's this guy? And I don't know any other way to say it, ladies and gentlemen, but recognition in some shape or form will get you where you want to go. And I thank you all very much. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.